The school board wanted to replace her with someone younger, faster, more with the times. But when evil walked through those school doors armed and ready to kill, everyone learned why the deadliest weapon in Lincoln Elementary wasn't a gun. It was a 58-year-old grandmother with a stop sign and 25 years of SWAT experience. Welcome to Retired Soldier Stories. Before we begin this incredible tale of hidden valor and maternal instinct meeting tactical precision, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from today? And if you believe that heroes come in all forms, even fluorescent safety vests, hit that subscribe button and help us honor those who protect our most precious treasure, our children. Margaret Chen stood at the corner of Maple Street and 3rd Avenue at exactly 7:45 a.m., just as she had every school day for the past 3 years. The intersection wasn't particularly dangerous. Lincoln Elementary sat in one of Millbrook's safer neighborhoods, but it was busy enough during drop-off and pickup times to warrant a crossing guard. She wore the regulation fluorescent yellow safety vest over a navy blue windbreaker, white sneakers that had seen better years, and carried the standard-issue stop sign that had become as much a part of her identity as her silver hair and wire-rimmed wire. Glasses. To most people, Margaret looked like exactly what she was supposed to be. A retired grandmother supplementing her pension with part-time work that kept her active and involved in the community. The parents dropping off their children knew her as Mrs. Chen, the polite but unremarkable crossing guard who always seemed to take a little too long to clear the crosswalk. Some joked that she was getting too old for the job, that her reflexes weren't what they used to be. The kids called her Grandma Safety with the casual affection children reserved for familiar adults who existed on the periphery of their world. What none of them knew was that Margaret's real name was Sergeant Margaret Deadeye Chen, retired after 25 years with the FBI's hostage rescue team. Her official record showed 847 successful operations, 23 different terrorist organizations neutralized, and a sniper accuracy rating that was still classified because revealing it would compromise ongoing national security protocols. But that was another lifetime, before her husband died, before her daughter moved across the country, before the nightmares made sleep impossible, and the only peace she could find was in the simple act of protecting children who would never know her. Real story. The trouble at Lincoln Elementary had been building for weeks, though most people hadn't noticed the signs. Margaret had. It started with David Kowalski, a 34-year-old unemployed mechanic whose ex-wife had enrolled their 8-year-old son Tommy at Lincoln after moving to town for a fresh start. David had a history of domestic violence, a restraining order that he'd violated twice, and the kind of escalating anger that Margaret had learned to recognize during her years hunting the most dangerous men in America. She'd first noticed him 3 weeks ago, parked across the street from the school in a rusted Chevy pickup, watching the children during recess. Margaret had memorized his license plate number within 5 seconds, run it through contacts she still maintained in law enforcement, and confirmed what her instincts had already told her. David Kowalski was a man capable of terrible things. The restraining order required him to stay at least 500 feet from his ex-wife and son. The school was well within that boundary, but David didn't seem to care about legal niceties. He'd been showing up sporadically, sometimes just sitting in his truck, sometimes walking slowly past the school during lunch period, always watching, always calculating. Margaret had reported her concerns to Principal Williams, a well-meaning woman in her 40s, who ran Lincoln Elementary with the kind of bureaucratic caution that came from 30 years in education. Williams had assured Margaret that they were monitoring the situation and had protocols in place, but Margaret knew that protocols written in conference rooms rarely survived contact with real violence. She'd also spoken to Officer Bradley, the community liaison cop who visited the school twice a week for their officer-friendly program. Bradley was young, earnest, and had never drawn his weapon outside the firing range. He'd taken Margaret's concerns seriously enough to file a report, but not seriously enough to understand what she was really telling him. Someone was going to die if David Kowalski wasn't stopped. That Tuesday morning started like any other. Margaret arrived at her post at 7:30 a.m., 15 minutes before her official start time. and began her routine surveillance of the area. She checked sight lines, noted wind direction out of habit, and mentally cataloged every vehicle, every pedestrian, every potential threat or asset within a 3-block radius. David's truck wasn't there, which should have been reassuring but somehow wasn't. In Margaret's experience, the absence of a known threat was often more dangerous than its presence. The morning drop-off proceeded normally. Parents kissed their children goodbye, reminded them about after-school activities, and drove off to their own lives without a second thought about security. Margaret helped a steady stream of 7, 8, and 9-year-olds cross safely, exchanging the kind of gentle banter that had become second nature. "Good morning, Emma. How's your science project coming along? Hi, Mrs. Chen. I'm building a volcano and it's gonna be awesome." "That sounds wonderful, sweetheart. Now look both ways before you cross." Simple interactions that reminded Margaret why she'd chosen this job. After 25 years of hunting monsters, there was something healing about protecting innocence instead of avenging its loss. At 8:15 a.m., 5 minutes before the final bell, Margaret noticed the black Honda Civic parked 2 blocks away. It hadn't been there during her morning sweep, and the positioning was wrong. Too far to be a parent dropping off a child, too close to be random. She couldn't see the driver clearly through the tinted windows, but something about the vehicle's stillness triggered alarms that 25 years of tactical experience had hardwired into her nervous system. She was reaching for her cell phone to call Officer Bradley when she heard the first scream from inside the school. It was a child's voice, high and terrified, followed immediately by an adult woman shouting something Margaret couldn't make out. Then came the sound she'd heard too many times in her career to mistake for anything else. Gunfire. 3 shots in rapid succession. The sharp crack of a handgun echoing off brick walls and concrete floors. Margaret's transformation was instantaneous and complete. The gentle grandmother disappeared, replaced by a weapon system that had been dormant for 3 years, but never deactivated. Her mind shifted into tactical mode, automatically processing threats, assets, and options with the speed and precision that had made her one of the FBI's most effective operators. She dropped her stop sign and sprinted toward the school's main entrance, her arthritic knees suddenly working perfectly, her slow reflexes operating at combat speed. As she ran, she pulled out her cell phone and speed-dialed a number she'd hoped never to use again. "This is Margaret Chen, badge number 2847, retired HRT. I have an active shooter situation at Lincoln Elementary School, 1247 Maple Street. I am on scene and engaging. Send everything you have, but I'm going in now." She didn't wait for a response. She couldn't. Every second of delay meant more children at risk, and Margaret had spent a quarter-century learning how to save people when seconds mattered more than protocol. Main entrance was locked. Standard security procedure that would keep the shooter contained but also trap the victims inside. Margaret didn't hesitate. She picked up a decorative rock from the school's garden display and put it through the office window in one fluid motion, clearing the glass with her jacket sleeve before vaulting through with an agility that would have shocked anyone who'd seen her carefully stepping through crosswalks an hour earlier. The hallway was chaos. Children were screaming. Teachers were shouting conflicting instructions, and somewhere in the building, Margaret could hear more gunshots. She grabbed the first adult she saw, Miss Rodriguez, the second-grade teacher who always waved at her from the classroom window. "How many shooters?" Margaret demanded, her voice carrying an authority that made Miss Rodriguez stop panicking and focus. I don't know. Someone said it was Tommy's father, but I didn't see. Where are the shots coming from? The cafeteria, I think. Maybe the gym. Mrs. Chen? We need to get out of here." Margaret shook her head. "You need to get the children to the safe room. Do you have a lockdown protocol?" "Yes, but..." "Execute it. Now, lock every door. Turn off every light. And keep the kids quiet no matter what you hear. Do not open those doors for anyone except uniformed police officers. Do you understand me?" Miss Rodriguez nodded. seeing something in Margaret's eyes that convinced her to stop arguing and start moving. Margaret moved deeper into the school, her mind automatically mapping the layout she'd studied during her 3 years of walking past these walls. The gunfire was coming from the direction of the cafeteria, which meant the shooter was in the central part of the building, the worst possible location for containing the threat, but also the area with the most potential escape routes. She found the first body near the main hallway intersection. Mrs. Patterson, the school secretary, lying motionless in a pool of blood that was still spreading across the polished linoleum. Margaret knelt beside her for 2 seconds, confirmed that she was beyond help, and continued moving. The shooting had stopped, which was either very good or very bad. Either the shooter was reloading, moving to a new position, or had accomplished whatever he'd come here to do. Margaret's experience told her it was probably the second option. Active shooters rarely stopped until they were stopped. She heard voices coming from the direction of the cafeteria. A man shouting, his words echoing off the walls in a way that made them hard to understand. But Margaret caught enough to confirm her worst fears. "Want my son? Give me Tommy, or I start shooting more of them." A hostage situation. The nightmare scenario that turned a tactical problem into a psychological chess match where one wrong move meant dead children. Margaret reached the cafeteria entrance and carefully peered around the corner. What she saw made her blood run cold. David Kowalski stood in the center of the large room, holding a pistol in one hand and what looked like a homemade explosive device in the other. Around him, huddled on the floor in a terrified cluster, were approximately 30 children and 4 adults. Margaret could see Tommy Kowalski among the hostages, his small face frozen in shock as he stared at his father. David was pacing back and forth, his movements erratic and aggressive. Margaret could see the signs of someone who'd pushed himself past the point of rational thought. The dilated pupils, the rapid breathing, the way he kept wiping sweat from his forehead with the back of his gun hand. "I know you're out there," David shouted toward the hallway. "Police, teachers, whoever. I want to talk to my ex-wife, and I want my son. You bring them both to me, or I'm going to start shooting these kids one by one." Margaret felt the familiar calm that always descended on her in moments like this. The panic, the fear, the awareness of stakes. All of that got filed away somewhere she could deal with it later. Right now, there was only the problem in front of her, then the tools she had to solve it. She assessed the tactical situation with the methodical precision that had made her legendary among her peers. David was positioned roughly in the center of the cafeteria, approximately 40 feet from her position. The hostages were clustered to his left, giving her a clear shot if she could get the right angle. The explosive device changed everything. Even if she could guarantee a clean kill shot, there was no way to know if the bomb was rigged with a dead man's switch. This wasn't a sniping problem. This was a negotiation problem that might become a sniping problem, and Margaret had 25 years of experience with both. She pulled out her cell phone and dialed the school's main number. Through the cafeteria windows, she could see David's head turn toward the sound of a ringing phone in the main office. "Answer it," she called out, her voice carrying clearly across the space between them. "I want to talk." David spun toward the sound of her voice, his gun swinging wildly as he tried to locate the source. "Who are you?" "Are you police? I'm someone who wants to help you get what you want," Margaret replied, stepping partially into view but keeping most of her body behind the doorframe. "My name is Margaret. What's yours? You know my name. Everyone knows my name. Everyone knows my name." "I'm the monster who wants his son back." Margaret could hear the pain beneath the anger, the desperation of a man who'd lost everything, and saw violence as his only remaining option. She'd talked to hundreds of men like this over the years, people who'd been pushed past their breaking point and couldn't see any way forward except through more destruction. "David," she said, using his name deliberately. "David, I can see you're hurting. I can see this isn't what you wanted when you woke up this morning. Don't pretend to understand me, lady. You don't know what they did to me. They took my son. They turned him against me. You're right, David. I don't know your whole story. But I know your whole story. But I know you love Tommy. I can see it in the way you're looking at him. A father who didn't love his son wouldn't be here. Margaret was buying time, letting David talk, establishing the kind of psychological rapport that was the foundation of successful negotiation. But she was also moving, using the conversation to mask her positioning as she slowly worked her way to a better angle. They said I was dangerous, David shouted. They said I couldn't be trusted around my own kid, but I never hurt him. I never would. I believe you, David. But right now, Tommy is scared. All these children are scared. They don't understand what's happening. Margaret could see more clearly now. David's hands were shaking, and the explosive device he was holding looked crude. Probably fertilizer and fuel oil, the kind of bomb that could be built from internet instructions, but might not be stable. That was both good and news. Good because it might not detonate even if he wanted it to. Bad because it might detonate even if he didn't. I just want my family back, David said, and for a moment his voice broke with genuine anguish. I just want things to go back to the way they were. I know, Margaret replied gently. But David, look around you. Look at these children. They're not part of what happened between you and your ex-wife. They're just kids who want to go home to their own families. Then bring me my family. Bring me Lisa and Tommy and let us walk out of here together. Margaret could hear sirens in the distance now. The cavalry was coming. But they were still several minutes away. She needed to keep David talking, keep him focused on her instead of the hostages. David, I need you to help me understand something. What happens after you walk out of here with Lisa and Tommy? Where do you go? What's the plan? For the first time, David seemed to actually consider the question. Margaret could see him processing the implications, realizing perhaps for the first time that he hadn't thought past the immediate moment of getting his family back. We go somewhere new, start over, away from all this. And Lisa agrees to this. She wants to come with you. David's face darkened. She'll understand. She'll see that I'm not the monster they made me out to be. Margaret's heart sank. This was the delusion that made David truly dangerous. The belief that he could somehow force his way back to a life that no longer existed. That violence could solve problems that violence had created. David, she said carefully, what if Lisa doesn't want to come? What if she's scared? She'll come, David shouted, raising the gun toward the ceiling. Several children screamed, and Margaret could see Tommy flinch away from his father. She has to come. I'm not leaving without my family. Margaret made a decision that went against every hostage negotiation protocol she'd ever learned. She stepped fully into the doorway, making herself visible and vulnerable. David, look at me. Really look at me. David turned toward her, and Margaret could see him taking in her appearance, the safety vest, the gray hair, the grandmother glasses. She looked like the least threatening person imaginable. I'm going to tell you something, David, and I need you to listen carefully. I'm not just a crossing guard. I used to do a different job, a job that involves situations like this one. I've talked to a lot of men who felt like you feel right now. Men who thought that if they could just take control of one moment, they could fix everything that had gone wrong in their lives. David stared at her, confusion replacing some of the anger in his expression. And you know what I learned, David? It never works. Not once, in 25 years, did I ever see someone solve their problems by threatening innocent people. Not once did I see someone get their family back by scaring their children. You don't know what you're talking about, David said, but his voice had lost some of its certainty. Look at Tommy, David. Really look at him. David turned toward his son, and Margaret could see the exact moment when he saw what she wanted him to see. Tommy wasn't looking at his father with love or even recognition. He was looking at him with pure terror. He's scared of you, David, right now, in this moment. Your son is more afraid of you than he's ever been of anything in his life. Is that what you wanted? Is that the memory you want him to carry? David's gun hand began to tremble more violently. I didn't mean... I just wanted... I know what you wanted, David. But this isn't the way. You know it isn't. Deep down, you know that scaring children isn't going to bring your family back. Margaret could see the internal struggle playing out on David's face, the battle between desperation and recognition, between what he wanted to believe and what he knew to be true. It's not too late, David. You haven't hurt any children. Tommy is scared, but he's not hurt. You can still be the father he remembers instead of the monster he'll never forget. For a moment, Margaret thought she'd reached him. David's shoulders sagged, and the gun in his hand dropped toward the floor. But then he shook his head violently, as if trying to clear away doubt. No, you're trying to trick me? You're just like all the rest of them. He raised the gun again, this time pointing it directly at Margaret. David, don't, Margaret said quietly. Think about what you're doing. I'm done thinking. I'm done listening to people who don't understand. Margaret saw his finger begin to tighten on the trigger and knew that the negotiation phase had ended. 25 years of tactical training took over, and she moved with a speed and precision that belonged to a different woman entirely. She dove to her right as David fired, the bullet splintering wood where her head had been a fraction of a second earlier. As she rolled, her hand found the emergency fire axe mounted on the hallway wall. Not her preferred weapon, but it would have to do. David was turning to track her movement when Margaret came up out of her roll and threw the axe with the same fluid motion she'd once used to throw knives at Quantico. It struck David in the shoulder, spinning him around and sending both the gun and the explosive device flying in different directions. Margaret was on him before he hit the ground, applying a blood choke that rendered him unconscious in less than 5 seconds. As David went limp, Margaret quickly secured the gun and carefully examined the explosive device. It was fake, pipes filled with sand and wired to a battery that couldn't detonate anything more dangerous than a light bulb. David had been bluffing with a prop, but the threat had felt real enough to terrorize 30 children. Margaret looked up to see 30 pairs of young eyes staring at her in shock. Tommy Kowalski was crying, but he was alive and unharmed. They were all alive and unharmed. It's okay, Margaret said gently, her voice shifting back to the grandmother tone the children knew. The bad man can't hurt anyone now. You're all safe. The police arrived 3 minutes later to find Margaret Chen, crossing guard, sitting on the floor of the cafeteria with 30 children clustered around her. She was reading them a story from a book someone had found, her voice calm and soothing as she helped them process what they'd just experienced. The unconscious man zip-tied on the floor beside them hardly seemed to matter anymore. It wasn't until the FBI's hostage rescue team arrived that anyone realized exactly who had resolved the situation. Agent Martinez, the team leader, took one look at Margaret and nearly dropped his equipment bag. "Dead-eye, Chen?" he said incredulously. "Ma'am, what are you doing here?" Margaret looked up from the story she was reading and smiled. "My job, Agent Martinez. I'm the crossing guard." The aftermath was complicated, as these things always were. David Kowalski was arrested and charged with multiple felonies, though his mental health evaluation would eventually lead to treatment rather than a lengthy prison sentence. Tommy went back to live with his mother, who moved them both to a different state where they could start fresh without the shadow of that day. Principal Williams tried to give Margaret a commendation, but Margaret declined. She didn't want recognition or attention. She just wanted to go back to her post at the corner of Maple Street and 3rd Avenue, helping children cross safely. The school board never again suggested that Margaret Chen might be too old for her job. The children, with the resilience that only the young possess, gradually processed their trauma and moved forward with their lives. But they never forgot the day their crossing guard became something else entirely, and then became their crossing guard again. Margaret continued arriving at her post at 7:30 a.m. every school day. 15 minutes before her official start time, she wore the same fluorescent yellow safety vest, carried the same stop sign, and exchanged the same gentle banter with the children she protected. They knew, as did everyone in the community, that their children were protected by more than just traffic laws and safety equipment. They were protected by a legend who had chosen to wear a safety vest instead of tactical gear, who carried a stop sign instead of a rifle, and who had proven that the most dangerous weapon in Lincoln Elementary wasn't a gun. It was a 58-year-old grandmother who would do anything to keep children safe. Margaret never spoke about what had happened that day. When reporters tried to interview her, she politely declined. When the FBI offered to bring her back as a consultant, she thanked them, but said she was happy with her current position. Because Margaret Chen had learned something during her 25 years of hunting monsters. The greatest victory wasn't defeating evil when it showed up with guns and bombs. The greatest victory was standing guard so that evil never got close enough to threaten innocence in the first place. And so she stood at her corner every morning, a quiet guardian in a fluorescent vest, protecting the future one safe crossing at a time. Some heroes wear badges. Others wear tactical gear, but sometimes the most powerful protector is a grandmother with a stop sign and the absolute conviction that no one hurts children on her watch. So now I ask you, have you ever met someone like Margaret? Someone whose quiet service hides extraordinary courage. Someone who chooses to protect rather than pursue glory. Share their story in the comments. Because heroes like Margaret Chen don't seek recognition. They seek only the safety of those they've sworn to protect. Thank you for watching Retired Soldier Stories. If this tale of hidden valor and protective love moved you, subscribe and help us honor those who stand guard in the shadows. Until next time, remember that the person helping your children cross the street might just be the most dangerous protector they'll ever meet. And sometimes, that's exactly what our children need.